All right. 3, 2, 1. Hey there, guys. What is going on? And welcome to the Evidence-Based Excellence Podcast, yet again, with your host, Mr. George Cresswell. On, for the second time, what should now be working is a double camera setup. Hi, guys. How you doing? How you doing? So hopefully this all goes to plan. I went and invested in another camera so that I could start experimenting with other things in the future. So yeah, hopefully we're going to start taking things to new levels, to new heights, and we will see how it goes. But yes, so you guys are looking at me straight on now through the new camera. I hope it turns out okay. Had a little bit of a technical hiccup with the last time I tried to record this, and then you guys up there are looking at me through my phone, as per has been recorded the last 29 or so episodes, I think, or 28, however many it is. But yeah, so what I thought we'd talk about today, guys, is this would have been yesterday at the time I actually had this conversation, but obviously things went wrong and the recording didn't go very well, so we're here recording it now. I thought I'd go through some weight loss misconceptions, two big ones in particular that I think people get into traps with. Mainly the notions of, number one, this gloriously fallacious concept known as a calorie is not a calorie. A calorie is not a calorie, okay? And then number two, a little bit of a discussion about fasting. So this person I was talking to yesterday now, lovely person, is a bit confused about fasting and, you know, what energy deficit is, how fasting works, all stuff like that. So I thought I'd go into that a little bit on today's episode. It is an episode in and of itself. And obviously there's an article on my website, which we'll be going through a little bit later in the episode that you can also go and read. The link will be down below. I think its title is Fasting Magic. But before we get onto that, we're going to start with our discussion of, is a calorie, or rather the notion, the statement that so many in the fitness and health and wellness industry like to purport this idea that a calorie is not a calorie. Like, it's this notion that energy balance, calories in, calories out, right? That we're always told that, oh, weight loss is calories in, calories out, and it's all about the calories and this and that, okay? Well, fundamentally, it is. We'll get onto why that is in a moment. But a lot of people love to say, well, you can't even make that notion because a calorie isn't even a calorie. And then they use this as a segue to get into this notion that it's all about, you know, demonizing certain nutrients, particularly things like fructose. You'll often see demonized a fair bit, and, you know, simple sugars in particular, usually because they're also ketogenic / low carb / fasting zealots. But often used as a pretext to demonize certain nutrients and scare people, particularly because if you scare people, you'll be able to easily manipulate them into doing what you want them to do, which is typically taking out your program or your nutrition advice or giving you some moolah in some way. And I don't think that's okay, personally, because you're not telling them the truth. But then also that it's this notion to lead to this, and I'll show a little clip now to get the context for this, is that it's a way to get people listening to you because it makes them feel as though they aren't at fault, or it takes the personal accountability element out of some way, because then they say it as, oh, we're always told that it's calories in, calories out. It's all about the calories. And again, the clip of Robert Lustig, you'll see in a minute. And he says it's all about these two behaviors then, gluttony and sloth. And then instantly puts the viewer into a defensive state, or gets them listening in some way, because it removes that personal accountability element by making the actual model, the energy balance model, seem as though it's very oversimplified and out of date, so to speak. Okay, and typically then they'll start going on about the what we call the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity. Okay, and we'll get onto why that is a lot of bullshit, and we'll get onto why and how it's been widely and numerous timesly debunked. Yes, well done, George. But anyway, so let's get into this notion that a calorie is not a calorie. Okay, so I wrote a little bit about this, and the clip, which you may or may not have seen. In fact, we'll roll the clip right now.
A lot of obesity seems to hinge on this idea that we're overeating these hyper palatable, really delicious foods that are constantly available to us. At the end of the day, doesn't it come down to, if we eat too much, we're going to gain weight, no matter what the food is?
So this lends itself to this notion that a calorie is a calorie, that it's all about the calories. You eat too much, you exercise too little. Therefore, it's about two behaviors, gluttony and sloth. Therefore, if you're fat, it's your fault. Therefore, it's not the company's fault, it's yours. That's where this comes from.
And so in that clip, you saw exactly what I was talking about earlier. That's from 2017. As far as I know, this person hasn't really changed all that much. But yeah, I also wrote an article about this, which you can go read on my website, by the way. And people often conflate, another misconception is that people often conflate calorie counting with calorie deficit or energy balance, okay? These two things are not the same. However, they think because they logged their food on MyFitnessPal or any other type of calorie logging software, whether it be mine, which is in my personal training app, which you can learn more about in the future, by the way. It's coming down the pipeline very, very quickly. And even though like MyFitnessPal or whatever said they were in a deficit, or they simply tracked, and though that means rather that, they are now in an energy deficit, that's not what it means at all. You can obviously track calories, but still be eating too much and gain weight, or still be eating the same amount as though you burn, and you will be maintaining weight, okay? It's all about energy balance at the end of the day. That's because energy balance is a law of physics, okay? It's not a law or a statement that we just made up. Okay, it is a law of physics. Physical systems in our universe love to remain in balance. But anyway, let's go on to the differences then between a calorie deficit and calorie counting. Okay, now a calorie deficit refers to the physiological conditions that are present when a body, i.e. yours, for example, is in a state of net negative energy balance over time. That means that their intake is less than their expenditure. Okay. Expenditure is greater than intake. As a result, then you lose weight over time by law, okay? By physical law, okay? Calorie counting is just simply counting up the amount of energy that you eat over the course of a day, week, month, year, whatever it is, okay? That's all it is. It's just literally scanning a barcode more than anything nowadays, and saying that you ate 400 calories in this meal, and then it breaks down the protein and all the rest of it, but all you're doing is counting, okay? But it does not say anything about the physiological conditions that are present within the model, i.e. you, okay? So that's the difference. Just because you track calories does not mean that you are in a calorie deficit, okay? It's a very, very important thing to get your head around. What will happen is, and this is the thing that a lot of people get the misconception about, is that they think because they're tracking calories and it's a certain number, that if they're not losing weight, that means that then they're in a calorie deficit and they're not losing weight. Therefore, the calorie deficit isn't working, and calorie deficits don't work. No, you're not losing weight because you're not in a calorie deficit. Okay, weight loss is a direct consequence of calorie deficit, of negative energy balance, because negative energy balance is simply starving to death under a controlled manner so that we don't actually go all the way to death. Okay, that's the idea. Okay, weight loss is controlled starvation. Make no mistake about it. Tracking calories, therefore, is just a useful tool, a useful behavioral tool in order to accurately estimate the amount of energy that you are consuming on a daily basis. Okay, now most people are not going to be able to accurately estimate just based on what their eyes tell them. Okay, so you're going to look at a meal of all different types of foods, condiments on there, maybe, other things like gravy, and then the drink and all stuff like that. Most likely, unless you've gone through a long phase of rigorously tracking everything that you eat down to the gram, okay, you're not going to be able to accurately estimate A, how much is there, and then B, therefore, how much energy and how much of certain nutrients are there, okay? Now, this is a problem with intuitive eating as a whole. And a lot of people like to try and promote intuitive eating, and I'm not saying it can't be useful. I've got a full podcast available on intuitive eating, okay? A full podcast available on intuitive eating, which you can go and listen to. It's one of my earlier ones, where I go through some of the problems with it, but it can be useful, most likely useful if you already have, or rather only going to be useful if you have a good sensor in your mind of what is in your food, okay, in terms of nutrients and in terms of how much is there. Okay, a lot of people think that they're eating, say, 1 serving size, when in reality they're eating 3 or 4. Okay, cereal is an easy example. You track cereal for the first time, okay, and you realize how depressingly small 30 grams of Rice Krispies actually is. And a lot of people think that they're eating 30 grams of Rice Krispies, when in reality they're eating 230, okay, and then they wonder why they're not losing weight. Okay, not to demonize Rice Krispies either. Love Rice Krispies. But anyway, that's the idea. That's why tracking is so useful. It removes the fog of your mind to what you think is there versus what is actually there, okay? It's a very, very good behavioral tool, and it's very, very eye-opening when you start tracking things for the first time. That's why, and that's why as well, in order for this to be accurate, you need to be tracking pretty much everything, okay? I was talking to this about this person as well. When I went through my tracking phase for the first time I'd ever started doing it, for first, like with a food scale and everything like that, literally tracking everything, weighing out the milk that went in my coffee, weighing out the butter that went on my toast, weighing out the ketchup that went in my wraps, all stuff like that, okay? You need to be on point with it. But the good thing is, once you've done it, you don't even need to do it for stupidly long, okay? You don't need to do it for years and years and years. Even once you've done it for a few weeks, okay, you have greater awareness and greater perception as to what serving sizes of things actually are. Okay, already better than what you were before. Anyway, as I said, you can still track calories and be in a state of caloric maintenance or surplus, because tracking calories has no direct bearing on the physiological balance between energy in and energy out. Okay, it's just a good estimate for one of them. Okay, it's a good way to estimate one of them. Going back to this notion of a calorie is not a calorie, which is horrendously stupid. And we're going to get into why. Because, okay then, if a calorie, quote unquote, is not a calorie. Okay, let's get into this. If a calorie is not a calorie, then what is it? Okay, let's ask the question, what is it? So instantly, as soon as you come across this stuff in your spare time, guys, or you come across this stuff in your own life, instantly, if somebody's saying something like this and just, it sounds like they've got something interesting to say, but also it's making you think that what the hell do they mean? Ask them, well, what is this thing? Somebody tells you, like, oh, you can't track calories. It's not calorie balance. It's not calories in, calories out, because a calorie is not a calorie. You know, ask them, well, what is a calorie then? Because what they should say, if they have any knowledge of nutrition or basic science whatsoever, is that a calorie is the amount of energy required to heat 1 gram of water by 1 degree centigrade. Okay, or 1 degree Celsius. Not Fahrenheit, not Kelvin, 1 degree Celsius. And that tells you one big thing about this quote unquote calorie, let's call it what it is, measurement anyway. Because a calorie is not a physical thing. It's a bit like lumens. It's a bit like amperes. It's a bit like centimeters. It's a bit like kelvins, again, degrees, okay? It's not actually a physical thing that you can hold. Like newtons, for example. You can't hold a newton. You can hold something that is exerting the force under gravity that weighs a certain number of newtons, but you can't actually hold and physically interact with a newton. That is because these things are simply measurements. They're measurement tools. A calorie is a measurement tool like any other, and it's a measurement to represent the chemical energy that's stored within different foods based on their different nutrient makeup. Okay? Now, different nutrients, carbs, fats, protein, fiber, alcohol, all have different numbers of nutrients contained, all have different numbers or rather, all have different constituents, is what I meant to say, rather. Different constituents, which when they're broken down, give them different amounts of energy that contribute to this life-sustaining system known as the human body, okay, or known as our life-sustaining systems. So, the things that our body interacts with are the amino acids that are contained within the protein, the individual elements that make that up, the carbons, and then the proteins, the protons and neutrons, and all the rest of them. That's what we physically interact with, okay? The calorie is just the unit of measurement to understand all that, okay? And also, even the term calorie is a little bit misleading in this context, because we don't actually measure calories themselves when we measure our food. We measure something called kilocalories, because calories themselves are so small relative to the size and energy demand of organisms the size of humans, that to use the regular calorie measurement would mean we would be tracking calories in the millions, okay? Because think of how much water is made up within our bodies. And all of them have got, all of these individual water molecules, I suppose, but all of the water within our bodies has to be maintained at a certain temperature. That requires energy. And in order to do this, in order to maintain something as simple as temperature, okay, as simple as and complex as temperature, there is a huge energy demand. And if you were to just use calories, you'd be tracking numbers in the millions, because the unit of a calorie is so small. 1 gram of water. 1 calorie, 1 gram of water. Look at yourself in the mirror. There's a lot more than 1 gram of water in your body. Okay? So that's why we put the K in front. Same thing for when we use joules, okay? Because calorie is a measurement of energy, joules is also used as well. Joules you see more so used in physics, okay? When we're talking about nutrition, we tend to use calories a lot more, but you can also use joules as well. That's why you see kJ often on the back of your nutrition label. Some countries only use joules, okay? Some countries don't use calories, but it's all a measure of energy. It's a measure of the chemical energy within the food that you eat, that when it is broken down, gives us the nutrients required that when they are broken down help produce ATP, which ATP then helps us sustain all of our life-saving, life-promoting, life-continuing physiological functions. Okay? That is the idea. Okay? So therefore, by definition, a calorie is a calorie. Okay? By definition, it is. You can just dispel it just by knowing what a calorie actually is. And that is, it is a unit of measurement. Now think about it. Next time you come across somebody that they say this, just say this. Okay, if a calorie is not a calorie, then a centimeter is not a centimeter. A kilogram is not a kilogram. A gram is not a gram. An inch is not an inch. A lumen is not a lumen. An ampere is not an ampere. A Kelvin is not a Kelvin. Because each of these things are as equally absurd as the notion that a calorie is not a calorie. Okay? So you wouldn't say that that centimeter is not a centimeter. A centimeter is a centimeter, just like a calorie is a calorie. It's defined by how much energy is required to heat 1 gram of water by 1 degree centigrade, 1 degree Celsius. Okay? So, poof. Misconception, gone. So anytime you hear this, you know you're dealing with a snake oil salesman. You know you're dealing with a snake oil salesman. The other reason people often say this is, as I said, to start this process of demonizing certain nutrients, particularly so that they seem smart and they'll rattle off a bunch of scientific terms like, oh, it's the fructose, and fructose is broken down via the portal vein and it contributes to all this, right? All this, scientific jargon that they try and use buzzwords to try and seem a lot more smart than they actually are. But then they'll often use it as a way to demonize certain things in particular because they have a method of nutrition that they want to sell you. You'll often see this from, as I said, people who really like keto, or people who are zealots about keto and fasting and stuff like that, by the way, is that they focus a lot on what we call the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity, which is a very, very widely debunked and discredited model of obesity that basically posits that when you eat certain, simple sugars in particular, like fructose and all stuff like that, when you eat a lot of simple sugars, the insulin response is very large in magnitude, which it will be, yes. And because insulin inhibits the process of lipolysis, okay, which is fat breakdown from adipose tissue, which then it undergoes beta oxidation, which is what actually converts it into the forms of energy that we use. And then what happens basically from there then is you exhale the remainder from that process as CO2, okay? But in that process, lipolysis has to occur first. Lipolysis is a little bit like when you have the structure of adipose and then it breaks off a little bit to then be used as energy, okay? If it inhibits that process, okay, which insulin does, then by that notion, then eating these things would inhibit fat burning, and it basically, quote unquote, traps fat within fat cells. And then because you can't get the energy from that, you feel more hungry. As a result, it gets you to eat more, and then you end up with increased obesity because, quote unquote, you can't burn fat. Basically, the notion is that if you eat these things, these particular things, you cannot burn fat. And it's been widely debunked and discredited by many experts in the field, and that's why the energy balance model is our currently most accepted model of obesity. Basically because in any study that's been observed, when you are to equate energy and protein, but you were to vary the amount of carbohydrate and fat ratios from between diet groups, and you measure weight loss over time, you see pretty much the same weight loss over time. Now, one thing you might often see in low carb groups is that they might lose a little bit of weight more quickly, a little bit more weight more quickly. Now, that's because when you stop eating carbohydrates, you stop storing glycogen. Because glycogen is one carbohydrate to 2.7, 1 part carbohydrate to 2.7 parts water. Okay, that's what glycogen is. It's often stored in skeletal muscle. There's also stores of it in the liver. But when you stop eating carbohydrate, you stop being able to store glycogen. Okay, as a result, when you stop eating carbohydrate, the glycogen you already have is liberated, the glucose within there is liberated for energy, and the water is lost, okay? Now, during that process, that may result in a little bit more rapid weight loss at the onset, okay? But over time, this will level out, okay? And even studies that go up to a year and beyond, okay, show similar rates of weight loss when energy and protein are equated and carbs and fats are varied. That is a very strong bit of evidence to show that, in fact, it's not macronutrient ratios or in particular food demonization that contributes to weight loss, but rather it's this continued energy deficit process. Okay, and you can go read the ISSM position stand on it as well. Okay, weight loss diets come from a calorie deficit by definition. Okay. That doesn't stop some people, however, and whenever I watch this clip, it makes my blood boil. That doesn't stop some people from, again, purporting this idea that certain foods are bad. There's no such thing, really, as a bad food. You'll often hear the phrase, the dose makes the poison, okay? I need to bear that in mind as we talk about Stephen Gundry. And I'm going to try and flash another clip now from the Dr. Mike podcast. And fair credit to Dr. Mike, he absolutely took him up on this and, challenged him on it. A lot of people won't challenge people on things like this. But you're about to hear one of the most egregious and contemptible statements in nutrition that I've seen in recent memory. Roll the clip.
But that's not what we're talking about. You're saying an apple is not ideal to eat. You said grapes are sugar bombs that are problematic.
They are sugar bombs. There's as much sugar in a cup of grapes as in a Hershey's candy bar.
Yeah, but that requires nuance. Because I would never tell a child to eat Hershey bar over a grape. That will never happen in my practice.
No,
would you
but
recommend
you might
that?
allow the mother to give them apple juice as their
But I wouldn't.
drink.
That's not. We're not talking about apple juice. We're saying grapes. It's a child hears, a mother hears, grapes are a sugar bomb, might as well give them Hershey's. They will give them Hershey's.
Might as well.
And your example.
But why might as well? Don't you think grapes have more nutrients than Hershey's?
Well, believe it or not, extra dark chocolate has some of the highest polyphenol content.
But we're talking about milk chocolate.
I wouldn't give anyone milk chocolate.
Exactly. So why even bring the comparison?
So you saw the phrase there, grapes are sugar bombs, okay? And this is in the context of a man called Stephen Gundry, and what he's saying here is that you might as well, and you would have seen this in the clip again, you might as well give kids, you might as well tell parents to give kids candy bars if they're going to give them grapes, because they're basically the same. You know, and as I said, fair credit to Dr. Mike, he took him up on it. And like, if I have a person come in and I tell them that grapes are sugar bombs and that they might as well give them candy, the parent will literally give their kids candy. And then he goes, might as well. Because they care about their ideology more than actually promoting health. Okay. That's what you're seeing with these types of people. Okay. Grapes and candy are by far not the same. Okay. And everyone with a slightly functioning brain knows this, okay? Don't let that little fact get in the way of ideologues, however. But as I said, people who are nutritionally ignorant, and I don't mean that in a negative way, I don't mean that in an insulting way. I mean that in the way of people who don't know any better. If you don't know any better, you can be easily preyed upon by these people, okay? Often just because they want to get money out of you. So don't fall for these kinds of things. Don't fall for this bullshit. Okay? Again, when people act and behave in this way, this is a good telltale sign that you're dealing with an ideologue, not an actual person that cares about the end result of what they're saying. Okay? So as I said, or as I was saying rather, another key point of this, okay, that people get confused about is the notion of sugar-free versus full sugar drinks. And this is another one. People will say, oh, well, diet drinks are still no good for you. Diet drinks are just as bad. Therefore, you might as well have the full sugar version because it's just as fattening. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? So you have a can or a bottle of full-fat Coke, might have, I don't know how many calories it has. That's how long it's been since I last looked at a bottle of full-fat Coke, okay? I don't know. Let's just say, for example, 300. 300 calories, yeah? We'll just say 300 calories. Sounds good? Yep. Okay, cool. So that is 300 calories. And you opt for the sugar-free version, which has pretty much zero because there's nothing actually that's calorie-free other than water itself. But it's basically, okay? So you're in a net reduction of 300 calories, and you're telling me it's just as bad, just as fattening? Where the hell do you get off on this stuff? Oh, but it's carcinogenic. Oh, yeah, to individual cells in a petri dish and to hyper aspartame dosed rodents, maybe. Yeah, sure. Funnily enough, if I was to give you too much aspartame, then yes, probably would cause cell death and give you cancer. But the thing is, do you think in one bottle of Pepsi Max or, Monster Ultra or anything in your Canderel sweetener, okay, which is sucrose, okay, do you think there's anything close to the dose that's required? No. Oh, but chemicals. Go look at the chemical breakdown on a banana. There'd be many things in there that you cannot pronounce. Okay? Just go do it. I hate the chemicals argument as well. That's another big one. Chemicals is, does my fucking head in. But anyway, only because, again, the thing, a little bit of a tangent now, but most people can't even read the back of a food label anyway. And you're expecting them to be able to read things like aspartame, fucking E145 and know what that means. When they can't even read the fucking back and know how to work out how many calories are in each thing and how the amount of macronutrients within the food that they're looking at the nutrient label of formulates the overall calorie amount. People don't even know how to read that, but you're going to say to them, oh yeah, you got to go and read the really, really complex names at the bottom. It's like saying you got to go read Plato's Republic before you can even read Of Mice and Men. Okay? Ugh. Right, okay. Anyway, that tangent over. So again, but then you say that to people. And there's no compelling evidence that at the minute that diet drinks are damaging to us, by the way. No compelling evidence whatsoever at the minute. Okay? At least in humans. Okay? If you're a cell in a petri dish watching this, well, I have a few questions for you. But unless you're that, or unless you're a hyperdosed rodent in a scientific study, you haven't really got much to worry about. Don't worry, you haven't got much to worry about. Okay? If anything, it's going to help aid in weight loss, which is what we see when we compare even it to water. Okay? Because guess what it is? 99%. But yeah, the people still think that diet drinks don't even hydrate you. I mean, what do you think it is? Clue is in the name. It's a drink. It hydrates you. But then you have people opting for the full fat and full sugar variants because they believe the others are just as bad. And as a result, they are prevented from taking positive action because people have put their zealotry over what the actual data says. Okay? People told them, oh, the diet drink's bad for you. It's going to kill you. You can't do that. And as a result, they just keep doing the same thing that they've done over and over again because making the swap away from that to direct water is quite hard. As a result, they don't do it. When in reality, they could, just opt for the Pepsi Max and enjoy the utter sweetness. The utter sweetness of Pepsi Max with none of the calorific metabolic cost, so to speak. It just makes sense. It just makes sense. But people love to put zealotry over actual scientific evidence. But anyway, I hope now, after that 30 minutes diatribe, that you can sort of put this to bed, and next time that you see this being purported, that you can know that anybody who says a calorie is not a calorie is probably not worth listening to. And you know that calories in, calories out is just a way of acknowledging the laws of the universe, and that is the laws of energy balance. Okay? It is agnostic to humans specifically, whilst also being the very mechanism by which human life and human adiposity is regulated. And that goes all across the animal kingdom. Okay? That goes all across all organisms that result on the breakdown of ATP for energy. Okay? Just the most of them. Okay? Your dog does it. Okay? It's the way that your dog physiology works. Rhinos on the savannah. The saber-toothed tiger that hunted us hundreds of thousands of years ago. The woolly mammoth from Ice Age. He was the same. Okay? Breakdown of ATP. But then now that you know this, you can then also start to dispel some of the other things. And that's why this misconception is really so damaging. It's because it leads to other things. As I said, we've been through a couple of them already. But then, as I said, it leads to this notion that a calorie deficit, quote unquote, doesn't work. Okay? I tried that calorie deficit thing. It doesn't work. I wasn't eating enough to lose weight. Like, seriously, how? How do you reconcile that with, world hunger, for example? How many... I'm not laughing at it, but how many morbidly obese children do you see on the World Hunger adverts? Like, seriously. Seriously. Now, if you want to learn more about quote-unquote starvation mode and the actual way that it's characterized, and it's not the way that most people think it is, if you want to go learn about that, then go read my article, Slow is Smooth, Smooth is Fast, and I'll be doing a future podcast episode on that as well. But go and read that and learn about what metabolic adaptation actually is, and start learning about what metabolic adaptation and quote-unquote starvation mode actually is, okay? And then the last bit, the thing you need to be aware of with regards to this is there's energy balance, and there's only energy balance, but there's the variables that affect it, okay? Now, they come in the form of energy in and energy out, but there's even variables that affect that. Your environment. Funnily enough, I just released an entire podcast on environment, which you'd probably go listen to. The environment, the food choices you have within that environment, and the choices you choose to make, okay? Your daily activity, that can be occupational, that can be in terms of your leisure time, that can be with anything, okay? The type of exercise you do and whether you exercise, time spent exercising, exercise intensity, stress management, sleep, any other metabolic conditions and medical conditions you may have, okay? Hypothyroidism, for example. All of these things affect energy in and energy out. But it's still energy in versus energy out that's going to determine the overall outcome. weight loss, weight gain, weight maintenance, if you're in either of these things, and you will be in one of the three, then you know what the physical conditions are that you are under. If you've been on a diet, quote unquote, and you haven't lost any weight for 4, 5, 6 weeks, I'm not talking like you haven't hugely changed your body, like you've lost 10 kilos in 6 weeks, okay? Nothing like that. But if the scale really hasn't moved in terms of its average, like you've been weighing every day, taking the average, and the average has been at 84 kilos flat the entire time, well, you're very, very, very likely at maintenance when you thought you were in a deficit, okay? So something's wrong. Something's wrong, whether it be you're not doing a good enough job of tracking your daily activity, whether you think you're burning a lot more than you thought you were, whether you're eating back calories because you told that you can eat back calories from your workout or whatever it may be. You know, there's errors in your tracking, something's off with your scale, whatever it is, okay? Weighing under inconsistent conditions, whatever it is. Something's going wrong, and you're maintaining your weight, because if you were in a net negative energy balance, you would be losing weight because you're in the process of starvation. That is the crux of the issue, okay? That is the crux of the problem, and that is why, overall, a calorie equals a calorie. Now go and talk to people and tell them how stupid they are if they think that a calorie does not equal a calorie. Literally just say to them, well, therefore, if what you're saying is true, then a centimeter does not equal a centimeter. And just look at their face drop and in confusion as they try to work out what it is you're saying. And you probably end up in a fair few arguments. But anyway. So, getting on to a little bit of a discussion about fasting now, okay? And I'll link the article down below that you can go and read. We're going to paraphrase it a little bit, okay? I'm not going to go into too much detail about it. But a lot of people think that fasting is magic, and I'm basically here to tell you this is probably going to hurt if you love fasting, but it's not. It's not magic. I'm sorry. Sorry, I hate to break it to you like that. Okay, now that the people who are off crying have stopped listening and people who actually want to learn are still in the room, then here we go. So what you may find is that fasting comes in various different forms, okay? And is all a measure, or all a method rather, of doing the same thing. That is creating a state of net negative energy balance, okay? Now, you may do alternate day fasting. You may do a modified alternate day fasting. You may do a 5-2. You may do a time-restricted feeding, which is also known as intermittent fasting, also known as skipping fucking breakfast. But regardless of what it is, and I'll go through a little bit about all of these different methods in a minute, regardless of what it is, it's all to do the same thing. It's to eliminate windows or days where you would be eating so that you're not eating. As a result, you're eating less food than you were before, and therefore you lose weight over time. That is the idea, okay? And most of the benefits that you get from any form of diet come from the weight loss that it provides, okay? So a lot of people like to go on specific dietary things because they think that it's magic and it's going to bring them magic health benefits. Most of them, especially if you're significantly overweight, your health benefits are just going to come from the act of losing weight. It doesn't matter how you do it, really. Doesn't really matter how you do it. It just matters that you do it, okay? Let's go through a little bit about these methods then. So you have alternate day fasting. So this would be the typical thing where you see people, they have a full feed day and then a full fast day, where 0% eating on the fast day and then 100% eating on the feed day, okay? So you have 3 to 4 days a week where you're fasting and 3 to 4 days a week where you're eating, okay? Obviously, 7 days a week, so it's going to vary from one week to the other. It's basically, think of it like a 2-week cycle, okay? On 1 week, if you eat 4 days, you're going to be fasting 3. On the next day, because it will shift just to the opposite, you'll be fasting 4 days and you'll be eating 3, okay? Just by the way the week pans out, okay? That's alternate day fasting. It's just eating and then not eating and then not eating over the course of days. But then you have alternate modified. So what we have here is we don't have a complete fast day. We have a modified day where we have a little bit of energy intake on those fast days. So it could be up to, say, 25%, okay, of what you're eating on your feed days. Then on your feed days, you simply just eat as normal as you would before, okay? So that gives you a little bit of time on those fasting days. It makes them a little bit less torturous. And then you still have something to look forward to on those fast days. And then you have the feed days to look forward to as well, okay? So like a little bit of a compromise on the full fast. You're still getting some food, especially when you want to keep your protein intake up and all stuff like that on those fasting days. So it can be a good system, okay? Another one here is 5-2, okay? So 5-2, again, is very similar to the modified day where it can be up to, say, 25% of your fast day allowance on the fasting days. Then you just have 2 days of the week where you're on your fast, and then you have 5 days where you're on your full feed, okay? So it's the alternate modified day fasting, but you get to choose where the fasting days fall. Okay, so instead of having 3 to 4 days, you only have 2 days. They can sometimes be consecutive, okay? but you pretty much, you know, eat whenever you want. You have a completely open eating window, okay? And then on those days where you're fasting, you simply just have up to 25% of your energy intake. And as I said, you get to have them fall on days maybe when you're not training, maybe where you're not moving so much. And then on the days where you're training and you want energy to train because you want to train hard, you're in recovery windows in the few days post-training or stuff like that, then you can have your full feed. So it's a good way because you get that extra bit of choice over where those days fall. Finally, then you have time-restricted feeding. Time-restricted feeding, also known as intermittent fasting, is where you have 100% of the energy you would be eating on your fast days, as you would be on your feed day, but you restrict the time with which you eat, okay? So this is where you have a eating window across the day. It might be, say, 8 hours. So let's say you sleep 8 hours, you fast 8 hours. So say you go from, let's say you start work at 6 in the morning. So you have 6 in the morning till 2. So that's your fast time. From 2 to 10 p.m. you have your eating window, okay, quite a large eating window, and then say 10 o'clock you go to bed and you're back in work. So there you go. So that's one way that it can work. Some people shorten their eating windows. Some people do like a 18-6, okay, but most often it's a 16-8 fast, okay? And it's just a way, again, of reducing energy intake a little bit per day so that you end up in a net energy deficit by the end of the week. All of these, in theory, will produce the same energy deficit by the end of the week or for the month, for example, as they will because you're controlling for the same amount of energy, okay? So that is the basic idea. Compared to, you know, calorie restriction and any other form of, you know, dietary protocol, it's not really that superior in any way, okay? Again, when you think about it, because it all comes down to the amount of energy balance and the magnitude of the calorie deficit that you're in is going to determine the amount of weight that you lose. Makes no sense as to why just simply putting it at different times is going to result in different weight loss unless the amount of energy you're intaking over that time is going to be different, okay? So it's a very, very important thing to consider. So with fasting, a lot of people think that it's magic. It's not, okay? It's not magic no matter how many influencers scream autophagy at you, okay? Autophagy just happens when you are in a state of caloric restriction anyway, okay? For more about autophagy, you can go read one of the sections in my guide where it's autophagy. You can find that link down below as well. As I said, it isn't going to cure, you know, world hunger or bring world peace or bring anything like that, okay? It's not magic. It's just a way of creating a calorie deficit. It can be very useful. As a method of caloric restriction, it can be very, very useful, okay? So you have, again, if you're skipping breakfast or you're skipping lunch or you're skipping dinner, that's one less meal that you're eating. That's one less load of calories that you're intaking. Track that over 7 days or expand that over 7 days and then expand it over 14, expand it over 21. That adds up over time, okay? That compounds over time in a massive way. So it can be very, very useful, okay? It's not going to work for everybody. Some people, if they skip breakfast, for example, they're going to be very, very hungry in the evening and they're probably going to overeat in the evening, okay? So it matters that you can keep yourself in check during that eating window, okay? During that eating window, you have to be able to keep yourself in check. And one of the things that might happen is where some people might work better spreading their meals more out across a day is that what tends to happen for some people is if they backload their energy, they end up eating more than if they front load it. So what we tend to see is that if you eat more early on in the day, some people, that's going to then equate to them eating less later on in the day. Think about it. When you come home, you've had a stressful day in work, you've been to the gym, you've got all this other stuff to do, is when you're going to be under the most stress, when, especially if you struggle with stress eating and stuff like that. It may be the time that you end up crashing and, you know, diving for the crisps that are in the pantry, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden you've gone stupidly far over in terms of your calories and, well, what's going to happen the next day might be the same. So, whereas if you have a lot of your energy early on in the day, when you come to the end of the day, you might not be as hungry. And as a result, you might be less inclined to raid the pantry or raid the cupboards, so to speak. Another thing you have to take into account, it may be inferior for certain goals, particularly if you have like a muscle hypertrophy goal and strength outcome goals, because you're eating less and because you're getting less muscle protein synthesis responses across the day because you're not eating as much, that may be inferior for certain people. But for the overall population, it can be very, very useful, okay? The main one, however, with regards to fasting, however, the main thing you have to absolutely make sure 110 million% that you do is not be a pretentious prick about it, okay? No one cares that you're fasting. No one gives a shit. Really, really, no one gives a shit, and they don't care about hearing about it, okay? We don't care. Doesn't make you better than anybody just because you're skipping breakfast or skipping lunch or skipping dinner. Okay, it doesn't make you better than anybody. You know, it's not going to be that your food's going to be or what food you would have eaten is going to be going into the mouth of a starving child in Africa. Okay, not going to happen. You know, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. So don't get up in your ass being, oh, I'm doing intermittent fasting. Oh, okay. Get your head out from up your own ass and just do it. Just do it and do it repeatedly if that's what you want to do. Similarly, don't do it if you don't want to. Okay. Similarly, if somebody's doing fasting that you know, then be happy for them. They're trying to enact a positive change in their life. Okay. But if you're fasting, don't think that it's some sort of magic and you need to go telling everybody about it. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And the last thing we want is you being a pretentious prick all up in our faces. Okay. And then the last one then is follow the fast. If you are going to do it, then it makes sense to associate yourself with people that enjoy that type of thing and that will help keep you accountable and that you will help keep them accountable as well on your journey. Again, if this is something you've chosen to do, okay, it makes sense to associate yourself with people. Again, environment matters. Go and listen to my Environment Matters episode podcast. Yes, that makes sense. But environment matters. Matters that you're associating yourself with people that have similar goals to you and are going about it in a similar way. Okay, if that's what you want to do. Okay, and similarly then, especially with regards to social media and all stuff like that, when you decide, or if you decide that you want to go down a different path and you want to explore other things, then you can just simply unfollow them. You can just simply unfollow them. You can maintain the social element. You can maintain the friends that you don't have to be like, you have to exclude everybody from the fasting group. If you stop fasting, you don't have to stop being friends with people. But if you decide that you want to start doing something a little bit differently, then you should be able to. And you should be able to keep that social element, because if they really care about you and helping you develop, then they should be happy for you as well. I hope you found it useful. I hope that this 2-camera setup is going to work. I really, really hope so. We shall see. And hopefully we'll be developing this a lot more in the future. So that's it for me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful. And I will catch you all very soon. Out.